Stanford University.
This is Bio 150, isn't it? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, so we start off with a scenario. 40-year-old guy, quiet suburban life, married 15 years, 2 kids, 3.5 dogs, everything's standard, everything's going wonderfully. And one day, out of nowhere, he punches somebody in the face at work. Totally bizarre, out of character. The guy is standing there by the water cooler and makes some comment on some baseball team, takes exception to it, punches him in the face. Utterly strange. Things are quiet. 3 months later, his wife of 15 years, happy marriage, discovers he's having an affair with a 16-year-old checkout kid down at the Safeway. Really weird. Then 3 months after that, he absconds with all the money at work, embezzles it, disappears, and is never seen again. 3 possibilities. First one, this guy is a truly deep creep. Second, he is having the most immature midlife crisis you could ever imagine. Third possibility, he has a mutation in one gene in his head. And what we'll be seeing is this is exactly the profile that you get in a certain neurological disease where it's one gene that's out of whack. First demonstration of that. Okay, just to get a sense of who's here, how many of you think there is a genetic influence on sexual orientation? Okay, how many think it is possible for prenatal events to influence your political opinions 30 years later? Okay, how many think that there is a valid way of using biology to understand who's religious and who isn't? Yeah, not quite as many hands there. Okay, as long as we're in that terrain. How many people believe in God? How many people believe in souls? How many people believe in evil? How many people believe in free will? That's going to change. Okay. Oh, I might as well ask, is there anybody in this room who actually does believe in evolution? Just wanted to make sure, see what we're dealing with here. Okay, how many think that there is a genetic influence and that there's a basic biological difference, a sex difference in levels of aggression? How many think there's biological bases of sex differences in intelligence? Okay, who thinks it's all explained by nature? Who thinks it's all explained by nurture? Who think there's a magnificent, fascinating, nuanced interaction between nature and nurture? Yay, okay, well, everybody's going to get an A+ then. You already have the course under control. Okay, so we start off trying to find something in common. Look at these 4 events here. Or not, in terms of being scraped out there. But these are 4 circumstances that have something surprising in common. Having your period, having a brain tumor, eating a lot of junk food, taking anabolic steroids. Those of you who are not oriented to it, that's the ones that build up your muscle, like testosterone derivatives. Okay, these all have something in common. Having your period, having a brain tumor, eating a lot of junk food, and taking a lot of anabolic steroids. Anybody want to fathom a guess what's the commonality amongst the 4 of them? Yeah. Hormones, good. Okay, we're often running with hormones. Good. Even more specific than that. Something they all have in common. Oh, come on, somebody want to guess? I see these brief movements of hands there as people change their mind. Okay, it all has to do with hormones. They all have hormones in common, I say, trying to facilitate somebody making the next guess. Oh, come on, they all have something. Okay, we got to get out of here at some point. These all have 4 things in common. All of these have been used successfully in courts of law to explain the behavior of a murderer. In the first case, a number of cases where the fact that a woman was having her period at the time of killing someone was part of what a jury said led them to exonerate the person. A literature showing that a disproportionate share of female aggression comes around the time of menses. Next one, there is an area of the brain you will know oh so much about over the next 3 months called the amygdala that has something to do with aggression and has something to do with fear. And you get a brain tumor there, and in a number of cases you get someone who is uncontrollably violent. And this has also been used successfully in a court of law. Junk food. Any of you who are San Francisco history buffs will know 20 years ago, 30 years ago, Dan White, a disappointed office seeker, assassinated the mayor of San Francisco along with Harvey Milk. And as part of his remarkably successful defense for a double murderer that led to a remarkably short jail sentence was the famed Twinkie defense. The argument that his addiction to junk food caused wild fluctuations in his blood sugar levels, which caused him to do that. Finally, anabolic steroids, any number of cases of people having uncontrolled violence arguing because they were weightlifters in a wildly abusive range of taking this stuff had something to do with violence. Put all 4 of these together and we get the first of the 2 points of this entire course, which is sometimes the stuff that's going on in your body can dramatically influence what goes on in your brain. Second critical point. Tonight, when you've settled back down and you're ready to go to sleep and you're nice and relaxed and your heart's beating nice and slow, think the following thought. You know, that heart isn't going to beat forever. Think about your lips turning blue after that. Think about the blood flow slowing down. Think about your feet and your toes getting cold. And at that point, you will probably be increasing the rate at which that heart beats. And you will have just seen the second key thing in this course, which is sometimes what's going on in your head will affect every single outpost in your body. And what this course is about is the intertwining, the interconnections between your physiology and your behavior, the underlying emotions, thoughts, memories, all of that, and the capacity of each to deeply influence the other under all sorts of circumstances. Now, what we're going to be doing with this is trying to understand this under fairly difficult circumstances. If everybody here was here because they really wanted to understand why all the wildebeest on Earth mate in the same week each year, we'd have a fighting chance of figuring that one out. But that's not what we want to understand. We don't want to understand why birds migrate and don't get lost. We want to understand human behavior. Worse than that, harder than that, human social behavior. And hardest of all, in some cases, some grossly abnormal human behavior. And if you're going to try to do that, there's a problem, which is officially, it's complicated. It is a huge, messy process trying to make sense of the biology of human social behavior. And just as all sorts of realms, when one deals with messy, complicated problems that you need to think about in some wildly interacting way, we all have a strategy that we come up with. A strategy to make things easier, which is that we think in categories. We think in categories, we take things that are continua and we break them into categories, and we label those categories. And we do that in various settings because it could be extremely useful. For example, somebody give me an estimate on how long this line is. A foot. Okay, people who said a foot, what is it that went through your head to figure it out? You imagined how long a ruler is. This is 11.5 inches because it's 11 inches and 8.5 by 11. But everybody in here has this category in their head, things that are kind of the same length as a ruler. A continua of lengths, and there's a category for that. Suppose I'm telling you I have some friend who's a runner, he runs the mile, he's incredibly fast. In fact, he's one of the best runners in the country at this point. How fast does he have to have run the mile or better for you to be deeply impressed? under 4 minutes. And thus we have another categorical boundary there of there's an infinite variety of speeds with which you can run a mile, yet we have in our heads this boundary, people who are under 4-minute milers, you are very impressed with. Okay, now I want to impress you with another friend of mine who's a painter. And this person is such a great painter that they paint with 11 different colors. That doesn't work, because that's not a category that we have. We don't classify the quality of, or hopefully not, we don't classify quality of paintings along those lines. But what we begin to see here is, in the right areas, we have categories that we impose on things that are not categorical. Here's an example. Why should you do this? Where'd the example go? Here's one of the classic continua that we ever deal with, which is the continua of color, the varying wavelengths that take the rainbow from violet to red, and there's an infinite number of spaces in between. And what do? We have rules in English that you divide the continua here and here or whatever, and that's what you call a color. This is red, everything from here is red, everything here is orange, so on. You take a continua and you break it into boundaries. Why do we do that? Because it makes it easier to store the information away. Instead of remembering the absolute features of something, you simply say, it's a sub 4-minute miler. It's a line that's almost the length, that's about the length of a ruler. It's the color orange. How do you know that's the case? Because go and take people from other language groups where their language arbitrarily divides the rainbow at other points with completely different color terms, and they remember different profiles of colors differently than an English speaker might. Take a color, and if the color comes right in the center of somebody's color categorization, it comes right in the middle of the range of what counts as that color, people remember whether they saw that color or not far better than if you show them a color at the boundary. And people will show that as a function of what language they speak. Taking a continua and you break it into pieces because it's easier to deal with the facts. Another example of it. Here we have 4 objects, and as drawn here, simply because we have categories to describe the first 3, do one of those tests of show people a bunch of shapes and they come back an hour later and ask them, have you seen this shape before? And people are going to be far more accurate with this than whether they saw this or not. Because we don't have a word for it. We don't have a word that's at all sort of analytical, it's some squiggly whatever. We don't have a clear-cut category. Thinking in categories makes it easier for us to remember stuff. And it makes it easier for us to evaluate stuff. So that's a classic sort of response that we have cognitively to complicated things. But there's a bunch of problems with categorical thinking. First example, and first one you can see from a realm of language differences, in that not only is there a continua of infinite number of wavelengths, there's a continua of sounds that humans can make. And different languages draw boundaries at different points as to what count as similar sounds or different sounds. There's like 2 different TH sounds in English, which apparently we're not very good at hearing, but there's other ones we are. And that will affect your ability to remember stuff, what word it was, depending on whether it is on a dramatically different boundary, whether it is sound that sounds different to you or not. Example of this. Apparently in Finnish, people do not differentiate between the sound of a B and the sound of a P, whereas we have no trouble with that. But people from Finland do not make that differentiation, and I discovered this one day a number of years ago, where for reasons I don't even understand, I found myself needing to take testicular biopsies on baboons. Not having sort of learned that in junior high how you do that, I called up this guy at urology at the med school who happened to be Finnish, and I explained to him what I wanted to do, and he sort of took me through the paces and told me what thingy I needed to buy and that sort of stuff, and holiday packages of those where you can get a dozen, and sort of telling me how to do that. And once we went through, he said, what I want you to do, the thing to do at this point is get some practice. I want you to practice on a bear. What? He said, yeah, practice on a bear. And I said, are you kidding me? He said, I know it sounds crazy, but we have all the residents do that. It's a very good learning device. You know, either practice on a bear or an apple. Here we see the dangers of making mistakes about differences between B and P under certain circumstances. So we see one of the dangers there, which is when you are paying too much attention to categories, you can't differentiate two facts that fall within the same category. Next example. Remember back at various points of anxiety during exams and such back when, where there was a world of difference between getting a 65 on a test and a 66 on a test. Not particularly different, but because there's this boundary drawn there between passing and failing, there is this dramatic differentiating we make. When you put up boundaries, you have trouble seeing how similar things are on either side of it. Next example, one additional problem that you get when you think categorically. And for this, everybody needs to turn over one of the pieces of paper, the paper you're going to hand in, the questionnaire. And what I'm going to do is read you a series of phone numbers, and I want you to write them down as accurately as possible. Okay, ready? 243-2649, 650-3260, 2565779, 832-2449, 2-913-171, 2314-026, 593-2449, 74-38840, 83152-87. Okay, now what that exercise is, and no, that doesn't count towards the grade. What that will show, I'm sure, when in some obsessive burst of procrastination, I actually look through the answers tonight, what it's going to show is the accuracy is going to tank the second you go from the phone number pattern of 3 digits followed by 4, break up that pattern, and suddenly we all get screwed up because we're saying, wait a second, I thought it was a phone number that was 1 digit, now 2 digits, I can't, and it's gone, and you're on to the next one. And what we see there is the third example, which is when you pay too much attention to boundaries, you don't see the big picture. All you see are categories. All you see are, wait a second, phone numbers are supposed to come with 3 digits followed by 4. Another example of where we use categorical thinking. Okay, I'm putting up a number series here. Okay. Oh my God. Okay, what's the next number in this series? And why? 42. How come?
Plus 10, plus 9, plus 11, plus 8, plus 12.
Okay, so we're kind of oscillating all over the place there. Okay, so that's as valid as anybody else's. Who else has an X number in line there? What's that? 45. How come?
You're having 1, 2, 3.
Okay. Were you going to take that? 45. That's very... Okay, what else? Let me make it a little bit easier here. Okay, so what's the next number in that series? And what I'm telling you is if you think about the world with a certain set of categories in your head, you will know the next number in the sequence. So what's the next one?
7 billion.
7 billion.
You're just adding anything.
Okay, that one. Okay, 7 billion, that's another possibility. Although presumably it would be 7 billionth. Anything else? Any other guesses here as to what happens next? 4th, 14th, 23rd, 34th. What's the next one in the sequence? Yes? 44. How come?
Well, it's looking like you're just kind of going up like plus 10 in the tens column, but then when you're doing 2 fourths, and then the third number will be up first.
Okay, but remember, it's got to be 44th. What's that? Ordinal, cardinal, whatever it is. What?
42nd.
How come?
Subway.
You were right! You were right! Anybody who is a New Yorker will know what the next one is. These are the subway stops. And you get a bagel with cream cheese. Can you pass it back? Just head it on back. Yay. So you get New Yorkers, and while everybody else is thinking logical things like 43 and 41 and 45 and 7 billion and all of that, you've got this whole world of dividing numbers by subway stops. We think in categories. We think in categories, but as you just saw, there are these problems. First one being, when you think in categories, you underestimate how different two facts are when they fall in the same category. When you think in categories, you overestimate how different they are when there happens to be a boundary in between them. And when you pay attention to categorical boundaries, you don't see big pictures. Now, what our goal